Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. This is Nasa Strad. Today on the channel, I'll be showing you how to make a straight skirt, a pencil skirt. If it's something you're interested in, keep watching and let's get right into this. So for this video, we'll be needing our sewing tools. We'll be needing a zipper, lining. I have 1 yard of lining by 60 for this, so depending on the length you're working with, okay, and the size of what you're working for. And then I have 1.5 yard of ankara for this skirt. So likewise for this, depends on who you're working for and what length. So I went ahead to fold into two using the widest part of my body, which is the hip, and then I added some inches, 3 inches extra to that. Now I'm rolling a line at the top to serve as my starting line at that point. Okay, then after doing that, I will go on and then I will measure ½ inch at that point, like from the first line, which is my starting line. I'm going to measure ½ inch. Now this ½ inch adding to this is going to serve as a joining allowance when I'm attaching my band to my skirt. So after doing that, I'm just going to roll another line at that ½ inch point. So note that this ½ inch would be for the joining of the band to the skirt. That is so that you get your accurate length measurement. Okay, so it means our measurement is going to start from the first line, not from the second line. Now this skirt is going to have a band of 1.5 inches, so placing my tape with 1.5 inches outwards, I'll go ahead and mark my hip point, which is 8 inches, and then I will mark the skirt length for this. Now your skirt length can be long or short. It only depends on your preference and where you want your skirt to end. Now for the down part of our skirt, we're going to be adding 3 inches extra to that, which will serve as the hemming allowance. So we'll work while working on this. I'll tell you why you're adding that inches. Okay, so I'm just going ahead with my rule to just make lines at those points. So I have my original skirt length and then 3 inches extra for hemming allowance, and then I'll also rule the line at my hip point. Right, so we have our vertical measurements all down. Okay, now the next thing we're going to do is to start imputing our horizontal measurement starting from the waist. So you take quarter of your round waist, which is the round waist divided by 4. Now note, like I said earlier, my fabric is folded into two. This is the front part of our skirt, so it's closed. So you're going to place your tape from the closed end and then mark quarter of your round waist, then 1 inch for your dart and 2 inches for inseam allowance. That was what I marked at the waist. So that's your round waist divided by 4 plus 1 inch for your dart and then 2 inches for inseam allowance. All right, just mark that. Then you come over to the hip line and you're going to mark quarter of your round hip. That is your round hip divided by 4. You're going to mark that down and you add 2 inches to that. So our darts will not get to the hip area, so just add your 2 inches of an allowance. Now to get your knee circumference, we're going to minus 6 inches from your hip. So say for example your round hip is 40 inches, minus 6, you have 34. You go ahead and divide 34 by 4 inches. Okay, and whatever you have there is what you use as your knee circumference. All right, so for example, if your round hip is 40, minus 6, you have 34. 34 divided by 4, you have 8 inches. So go ahead and mark 8 inches and then also include your inseam allowance at that point. So you note that I'm marking this at the end, that for the where I added 3 inches extra for hemming allowance, because that part will be included. Now at the knee area, if you want to snatch this more, you can just take it in by ½ inch or 1 inch, depending on how fitted you want your skirt to be. All right, so note that whatever you're using at that area is going to affect your movement, so you should not have your skirt too fitted around that point. So we'll go on and then cut this out right now. So finish doing that. This is what we have for the front. So while cutting out, ensure you don't cut out your joining allowance, the allowance you're using to include for your band. Like I said, you can shape in the knee area more if you so wish to. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is to go ahead and fold up another piece for the back, which I have done. Now for the fold of the back, like that of the front, we folded using the hip, adding 3 inches extra, but for the back you want to add up to 5 6 inches extra. Now this skirt is going to have a slit at the end. Now from the close of my fold, I'm marking 4 inches inwards. This will be what I'll be using for my slit at the back. This is like the slit allowance for the back. You can use more or you can use less. Okay, you can use 2 inches for your slit allowance depending on how you want it to be. And after marking that, I just went in with my rule to connect the points I made together like so. All right, so we have the down, so you can see that is the allowance we're going to use. Okay, that would be our zip and slit allowance. Now the next thing we'll do is to bring in our front piece, which we already cut, and place it on that point. So you're going to place your front piece to start after the line which you marked. Okay, whatever you're using for your slit and your zip allowance at that point, you will just place your front piece to be after that line. You can go ahead and pin it down for it to stay in place. So what we'll do is to um extend the lines we have on the front piece to replicate them on that of the back so that we can work on this. So ensure you place your piece together properly. They are aligned in length, they are aligned in width. Okay, apart from that of the allowance you added. So we're going to extend our lines outwards like so using our rule. Okay, we have that out. Now what we want to do is to mark our zip allowance. The skirt is going to have a zip allowance, so before then we'll go ahead and trace the other sides of the skirt. That's for the front. We're going to trace it out on the back also so that they are matching perfectly. So for the sides, you want to have same thing in front and same thing at the back. Now for the center of our back, for the zip, I marked 1.5 inches at the waist area for my zip. Now for the hip area, I'm going to use 2 inches. Half inch I'm adding will be for my butt allowance. Remember, we have the butt at the back, so you need it to sit comfortably at that end. So I just marked that point together. Now the next thing we want to do is to determine the length of our slit, right? So you can take the measurement from under your hip and determine where you want it to start from. If you want it to be higher, if you want it to go down. Now the length of your slit depends on the length of your skirt. If you're making your skirt to be longer, you want to use a longer slit. Like if your skirt gets to the ankle, your slit needs to get to the knee so that you have an easy flow of movement. Okay, but if your skirt is above your knee, you want to have like a little bit of slit so that you're not exposed when you bend down or therein. Okay, so I just went on to just determine where I wanted. I was actually contemplating where I wanted this to sit. So if your skirt is long, you want to have a long slit. If it's short, you want to have a short sleeve. So make sure make short slit. So make sure you take note of that so that you don't end up abandoning your project or not wearing your skirt by the time you finish. Okay, so I've gone ahead to mark that where I want it to end, and I was still contemplating taking it higher more so that I have more ease. So what you want to do is that you take the length of your slit from after the point where your skirt will stop from. That's where you should take it, not where your hemming allowance is. That's what you want to do. All right. So then after doing that, on that point where I marked where my slit is going to end, I am going to mark 1 inch. So that part will be serving as my knee area. That's because the skirt is below the knee. Okay, so that point is going to serve as the knee area. So I marked 1 inch at that point, and I'm going to connect the zip allowance line together. So remember, at the waist area, I took 1.5 inches. At the hip, I took two because of the butt, and then at that point, that's the slit end, I took 1 inches. Now this is to give that hip area a little bit more curve. By the time you finish, it to give it a little bit more curve and it's not all straightened at that end. So watch how I'm going to cut this out. Okay, so this is what we're going to have. We just go ahead and open this up. So that is all for the cutting of the skirt. I'm going to make a notch at my zip allowance area for the back so that I have that down. Okay, then the next thing I want to do is to make a notch for our dart. Remember, I said this is going to have a dart. So you want to take your nipple to nipple measurement, divide that by 2, and then mark that from the center front of your skirt. Ensure to not mark this from the zip allowance area. Okay, mark that from the center front of your skirt and then make a notch at that point to indicate it. I also went ahead to indicate where my skirt is going to end. So the next thing I want to do is to cut this out on my lining. So like I said, I'm using 1 yard of lining. So I'm going to ensure that I manage this properly. So I'm starting off with the back piece. I just folded my lining into two, and then I placed my fabric on top of it, and I'm tracing it out. Okay, so you just fold your fabric into two and then trace out what you have. Now remember, I said I added 3 inches at the end of this, so I'm going to fold this up and then cut my lining. So the lining is going to be 3 inches shorter than the skirt. So whatever length you're using for your own, your lining needs to be shorter than that. If you're using 30 inches, your lining needs to be 27 inches. All right, so we'll be the same thing for the front part of our skirt, and just fold it up, place our skirt on top of it, and then we are going to just trace it out. So we're just folding it up to ensure we get accurately what we want. Remember, your lining should be 3 inches shorter. Now you can use more inches for your hemming allowance. So if you're using 5 inches for your hemming allowance, your lining needs to be 5 inches shorter than your main skirt. Now for this skirt not to have a bulge in front, I went down by 1 inch at the center front of my skirt, and I'm going to connect it to nothing at the other side of the skirt. So I'm moving 1 inch from the front of the skirt, that's from the center front of the skirt, and I made connected it to nothing at the other end. I will just go in with my scissors to take it out. I'm doing this on my Ankara and also on my lining piece together. So we have that taken out. All right, so I'll just go back in and mark my dart line again so that it's there. Just make a notch at that point. Okay, so we want to get into stitching this together. All right, so what we're going to do is to open this up. Now we're going to place our Ankara and the lining to be right side to right side. Now aligning them at the bottom, that's at the edges. So by the time you align them at the edge, you'll notice that you have the lining shorter than the Ankara at the top. This is how it's meant to appear. You will see how this will look like by the time we stitch it together. Okay, so just go on and then stitch it together at the ends by 1/2 inch. All right, this is for the front. You want to go ahead and stitch it down. Then for the back, we'll be repeating the same thing. Using one piece of this, you're going to place your Ankara right side facing up, and then place the right side of the lining facing it. Okay, so you're going to place this right side to right side, ensuring that lining. So for the back, you want to ensure you make marks to indicate the wrong side of your lining. Remember that just plain, you have nothing to differentiate them. So ensure you place them you make a mark on the wrong side you're using for this, so that you don't make any mistakes by the time you finish. So you're going to align them at the base also. Go ahead and then stitch it down by half of an inch together. All right, make sure you go use your ankara to stitch it down accurately. So this is the front after I finished. Now you can see I'm dragging this up, the lining up to meet with the waistline. So see, this is what we have at the base. This is the essence of adding, removing extra inches from that of the lining. So you go ahead and position them together and then stitch it on both sides, still on the wrong side. Now for the back piece of this, we're going to do the same thing. So this is what it looks like at the back after I finish joining it together. I'm going to align the waist area together like so, okay, and then I'll go ahead and stitch it by the sides, following the curves I have along the sides, and I'll just go ahead and stitch it down by half of an inch on both sides, leaving the top part of this open so that I can use that to turn this over to the right side. So I've done that. This is what I have after I finished. This is that of the front piece. You can see this is what it looks like. Okay, so you can see, and I ensure to give this a really good press so that it's relaxed. So what we're going to do next is to work on our dart, but before then I'll show you the back piece. This is what I have for the piece of my back after I finished doing that. So I've done the same thing. I've ironed it, I turned it over to the right side before giving it a really good press so that it's relaxed. Okay, so we're going to work on our dart now. So remember, I already made a notch for that. So if you didn't make a notch for your dart, no issues at all. Go ahead and just take half of your bust span, that's the measurement from your nipple to your nipple, divide that by 2 and then take that measurement down. Okay, so I just ensure that I was still on track, and then my dart is going to be 5 inches long. So I just use my tape to measure that 5 inches, and then I'll make a line at that point like so. Okay, after doing that on both of my leg of my dart, that's on the waist area of my dart, I'll go in and out on both sides by half of an inch. So remember, we added 1 inch for that allowance. Okay, and then I'll connect it to the ends of my dart like so. So I'm just simply showing you how to draw out your dart lines on the skirt so that it's easier for you to stitch it down. Okay, so this is what we're going to have. Okay, you're going to do this on the other sides of the front piece and also on the back piece. So after doing that, this is how you're going to stitch it down. You're going to pick the middle part of this, fold it up this way. Okay, so you want to fold it up this way, align it, and then stitch following the lines which you have drawn to give you a perfect dart. So this is what I have after I finished. That is for the front, and also for the back, this is what it looks like. Okay, I've gone ahead to place the dart on both parts of the back, right? So now we want to stitch down the zip allowance area for the back. I'm going to position my back piece right side to right side. I'm going to align that together perfectly. So in this instance, you're going to know if your skirt is of the same length. All right, you want to ensure it's of the same length. That's one mistake I used to make when I started learning how to sew. One part will be long and the other part will be short. It's really, really disturbing. So after placing them together, I folded my front piece and I placed it together. So you can see how I'm placing this down. So what I'll do is to ensure that they are equal in length and by the size. They need to be equal, because if they're not equal while you're stitching this down, you're going to have lots and lots of issues. By the time you finish stitching it down, your skirt is going to look tacky if they are not matching perfectly. Like I said, let them match perfectly in length. So I'm just using my rule to just trace out the ends of the front part of this. Okay, I noticed that that wasn't giving me what I wanted, and I took it off and just used my free hand to just trace it. So what I'm tracing is the allowance I have left from that of the back. Remember, okay, so we finished doing that. So what I want to do is to indicate the line for my waist joining. That's the way I'll join my band, and I'm just placing 1.5 inch outwards to indicate my hip point. Okay, so I just placed half inch firstly at the top outwards, and then I placed that. So for the waist area, the hip area, sorry, I just marked that half inch. So I'm going to connect that half inch to the top, that's the waist area, and connect the other end to the knee area. So remember, we have like a curve, we had a curve while we're cutting this out. So I'm trying to mark out that curve. Remember, I said the half inch we added for the hip area extra will be for the butt allowance, so you don't want to use that allowance. So that is just what I am doing there. So I just made a mark there. You can see the curve I have there, and I'm going to just make a straight line like an L shape going into where my slit is going to start from, like so. And I'll go over to the machine following that line, the curve I have from the waist area. Okay, that's the line you're going to follow the curve from the waist area down to the hip, stitch it down. So I noticed my curve wasn't so nice, and I just went in with my curve rule to just get that perfectly well, so that it is better than what I had before. All right, so you can see this is better than what I had. I will just follow it through, stitch it down that to that end. So I've stitched it down. You can see how it looks like in front. I'll turn this over and show you. So what I did was that I left from the waist area down to the hip because I want my zip to sit on that area. I didn't stitch it down. So the stitching started from the hip area down to the L shape I had. Okay, now for this part of the skirt, you can decide to leave it this way. All right, you can decide to just leave the ends of your skirt that way. All right, or you can decide to just stitch it down at that point. So what I'm going to do is to just make a slanted line going towards the part where I have like a double fold. Sorry, I will just make a slanted line to that point. You can see my white chalk that way. I'll follow it through and stitch, which I have done. Okay, that's to keep that in place. All right, so next thing we're going to do right now is to join our skirts together. So I'm placing this right side to right side. Now I still have my pins on the zip allowance area for the skirt where I'm placing my zip. So my zip is going to stay there till I want to work on my band. So I'm going to place this together, align it together. So now you can see that the sides of my skirts are matching after I've stitched down the zip area. You can see how it is matching. So this is how yours should appear. You don't want the front to be bigger or the back to be bigger. Your skirt is not going to look nice inside of it. So what we're going to do is to indicate our hip points. Again, it's important. Then we're going to, after indicating your hip point, what you want to do is that you repeat the same process for both sides, the right and the left. You indicate the hip points, and then you indicate the waist is already at the top, so that is known. So how to indicate this is that you mark the half inch we're using for joining allowance. You place your 1.5 inch band allowance outwards, and then you indicate your hip point. Okay, now we want to join our skirt, so you're going to take the measurement you have around this. Okay, so you're going to place your tape this way, take the measurement you have around this, and then you divide it by 2. So the measurement you have around your fabric is placed, two of them are placed together, so your measurement is taken by 2, so it's divided by 2 instead of 4 while we're cutting out. So since our fabric is opened up, we're going to be dividing by 2. Say for example, your round hip is 40, and after taking this divided by 2, your round hip is 20 inches. Okay, and when you place your tape that way, you have say 22 inches or 23 inches. You have 23 inches. That means you have 3 inches extra. You're going to share that 3 inches to the right side, to the left side, by dividing it into 2. So 3 inches divided by 2 is 1.5. You give 1.5 inches to the right side, 1.5 inches to the left side. So whatever you do to the right, you do the same thing to the left. You repeat the same process around the waist area. Okay, take the measurement you have there, divide the remnant by 2, and then share it equally to both ends. Do the same thing to the hip like you've done, and then at the knee area you're going to repeat the same thing. Now if you want your knee to be a bit more snatch, you can go in by 1/2 inch extra, like I said before, you can just take it in extra for you to have that snatch effect around the knee area. Okay, so I just did that measurement, took that of the waist, divided it by 2. So note that the measurement you took while cutting your skirt is the same measurement you're going to take while you're stitching it down. All right, except the person you're making for, you decide to make for a smaller person, that's where you can change that. But you need to take note of that measurement you took from the starting, so that by the time you finish making this, it's not small on your client. You don't want your client to come back and tell you, oh, this thing is too tight, and you have no allowance whatsoever inside. So take note of the measurement you're using for this. And I just went in with my curve rule to just connect that together, especially at the hip area. Okay, you need the curve rule to work with this, so that the hip area gets that defined curve which it needs. Like I said, if you want to snatch in your knee, you can absolutely do that. So I'll just go on, follow through with the lines, and then stitch it together. So I've stitched it. This is what the skirt looks like after I finished. All right, this is what we have. So we want to work on the band. I've gone ahead to cut out this piece of band. Remember, I said I want my band to be 1.5 inches by the time I finish. So I cut out a band that measures 4 inches of width, and the length is what I have around the circumference. And I went ahead to iron my gum stay to it, and then I folded 1/2 inch on one side of it. So to stitch down my band, I'm going to start from the inside of this. I'll be placing the wrong side of my skirt to the right side of my band, and I'll go ahead and stitch this all around by 1/2 inch together. Okay, so you're going to stitch that. After that, this is what I have. Okay, this is what it looks like after I did that. So what I'll do next is to just fold this up inwards and then close it down this way and stitch it down again on top of it. So ensure you're using a matching thread to do that, and go ahead and fix the zip. So this is the final look of the skirt. I fixed the band, as you can see, and I've gone ahead to fix my zipper to the skirt. Let me know in the comment section what you think of this. If you found this video helpful, please subscribe to the channel. If you're yet to subscribe, give this video a thumbs up. Thank you for always watching my videos. Thank you, and thank you. Love you, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.